Well, I'm going to bend some sides here. I think I'm first going to give you a little tour of my setup. I've bent sides lots of different ways with heated irons and freehand and all that stuff. And this is what I finally come up with. It works quite well for me. It's pretty much the way a lot of guitar makers bend their sides. It starts with a form that's just the profile of the instrument exaggerated slightly, and this one happens to be spanned by 6-inch pieces of essentially a metal conduit, electrical conduit. It's pretty cheap. And it's got a base to it, and then it's got some long screw hooks on it here with regular wing nuts on the ends and washers. And they're in little screw eyes along the edges. This is the most critical component of it, and it's I did mine as a lamination. It could be solid. If you laminate them, you can make one that's basically adjustable to more than one waist size. I was doing some experimentation, so it seemed to make sense to me to make it adjustable. But the truth is, once you've settled on a shape, having it be solid works as well, maybe better. You don't have to worry about it coming out of adjustment. Mark it which end goes to the peg head and which end goes to the tail. And then there's a middle mark there at the waist that the slots sit over. So that's that. The sides are assembled between a sandwich of metal plates, and then I use a silicone rubber heat blanket to provide the actual heat. First thing I do is I take a pair of sides and I make sure that they're book matched. I have a particular mark on mine that will end up going at the waist, and I like to make it so the mark is on the inside. It just makes it easier when I'm dealing with my form later. And then a trick that I got from Bob Taylor, actually. There's some great videos on YouTube, and he was showing his side bending thing. Now his is all automated, and he's got, you know, metal stainless things that have 300 pounds of pressure on them, and it's kind of crazy, but wonderful. I'm sure it's very efficient, kind of beyond my means and beyond my necessity. But one thing he did that I loved is he used craft paper. He wraps the sides in paper, which is what I'm about to do. First of all, I like to tape them together so that they stay perfectly even with each other, and I just put a little spot of blue tape on either end. Now the craft paper that I put them in is also marked with that center line. That is the waist center line mark. So this slips into my little sheet of paper, and I just ahead of time cut a bunch of these 9 inches wide, and the length of the sides, because my sides are 2 inches approximately. So it gives me a little bit of spare, a little bit of room. So I line up the metal, I line up the sides on top of it like so. And then he actually bends his dry, which I think is great. I still haven't gotten there. You could spritz this, but that minute goes everywhere. I just use a wet rag and I just moisten the paper like that. So not very much water on it. But the truth is, unlike guitars, dulcimers, at least my shape, it's not really radical bends. The waist is the most radical spot on them. So I do that, line that all up, and then the top piece of metal goes on top of that. Notice they don't straighten out fully, probably if they were spring steel, or maybe if they were stainless, I don't really know. These are aluminum flashing. So, and then the blanket goes on top of that. Now the blanket, I think I got this from Luthier's Mercantile, I'm not remembering exactly. And then this goes in place with the slots in the caul being over top of where these bolts are. Now, you know, a lot of the ones that you make guitars with have big screw arrangements. It's just not necessary with this gentle a bend. Now, I'm doing something a little different. Most people just use what comes with the, it doesn't come with it, you can buy it, a timer and a rheostat. But I found that the heat thing is really very important, because it's getting it right and keeping it right. So I hunted around the web and I found this gizmo, which had to be assembled, and I had to get a relay switch that would handle the amperage of the blanket. But it's basically a controls the thermocouple controls it. It's a temp sensor, and as the temperature hits a certain predetermined set point, it cuts juice to it, and then when it goes below a set point, it cuts juice back into it, and it maintains the temperature. It's sort of overkill in that you can do that pretty well with just this has got a timer on it. So at this point, I go ahead and flip this timer up to 15 minutes, and that flows juice to the blanket, which gets hot pretty quickly. I apply some pressure with these. 1, 2. Now this is a infrared temperature sensor. It's already up to 173 degrees, so that's it's pretty toasty. I like to get a little bit of pressure down on this. It's still about a ½ inch from bottoming out on that waist. But then these end calls, which similarly have slots in them, I start in here and I kind of push it out this way to make sure that I'm getting full contact with the rubber against the metal. And then I slip these bolts in place and spin them down. Once again, it's a great advantage in dulcimer land that our curves tend to be a little more gentle than guitar making curves. Do that and do the same thing on this end. Kind of grab it in here and go on out like so. Stop over. If you overshoot it, it's hard to back up without putting slack back in the rubber blanket. So, isn't it amazing that silicone rubber can handle so much heat? Now if you put this thing on high, I think you can get it up. I've scorched sides before I came up with this gizmo, which is why I went to the bother with it, I guess. How are we doing? I try to point it right at the bump I can see of the actual thermocouple sensor. We're at about 230 degrees there. It's probably because the pressure goes on at first, but it always gets hotter at the waist, at least initially. At 275 there now. The target heat range is right around 300 in my universe, which seems to work fine for all woods that I've found: mahogany, cherry, walnut, rosewood. They all seem to respond pretty well. It's apparently pretty far below their burn point, but it certainly vaporizes any moisture that's in the sides, or in the paper, which is partly what initiates the bend. Once the cellular structure of the wood gets hot, it releases its rigidity and is willing to mold. So usually once I'm sure that I've got the temperature I'm shooting for, I'm at 189 now. So that's usually at this point that I set it back to the full 15 minutes. I like to have it have a full 15 minutes at heat. So this little timer switch will go off, and it's sort of like the same timer switch you might use on a heat lamp in a bathroom. So it'll turn off after 15 minutes, and if you're not building very many, you can actually just leave it in the press overnight. There's another approach that I also got from Bob Taylor. Let's see if you can see it down here. You can take them out earlier and put them in a jig like this. I don't know if you can see that very well. There we go. It basically holds them in that exaggerated shape with just 5 touch points, and it's pretty darn easy to make. All of the 4 of the dowels are stationary, and this one comes in and out of these slots, and it just holds them at the waist. And that way I can hold a bunch of sides ready to go into the form, and know that they'll maintain their shape. So that's my setup on side bending.